That's such a great stance ruling, by the way, for
Lawrence of
a
Arabia.
film podcast where we like pride ourselves on deeper analysis. We're like, Lawrence of Arabia, it's good. It's no Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen Lord of the Rings.
Welcome to Frame Rate, the show where we rate frames. You go first this time, sir. Who are you?
I'm Abe Epperson, one of the hosts here.
Me also, Michael Swaim. And with us a very special guest. Please introduce yourself.
My name's Brooks Brown.
Thank you for being here.
Just a fan of Michael and Abe.
Aw.
Yep, that's if you are a fan of us, reach out and we will have you on the show instantly. No
Yeah, that's how
questions
it
asked. Well, yeah, Brooks was just hanging out in the alley outside.
Yeah, and we're just like, come on over here, boy.
Yeah.
We got a podcast for you.
We've got an incredibly difficult film. Have you been watching it? Yeah, I've basically been living off it in this alley for the last 2
Right.
weeks.
Anyway, have you seen Synecdoche in New York?
Synecdoche, New York. A very great Charlie Kaufman film written and directed by, the year is, I believe, 2008. That's right. Incredibly dense, so let's just get into it.
Just
I'll try
way
and...
too dense is my thought.
Okay, maybe Abe should go first because I want to hear that, unless you were just joking.
No, I think yes, I
But
do think it's too dense.
I
But
also-
like, not in a way that I don't feel I understand it. I just think it's like, okay, we get it. Just like, but it still has some very unique thoughts that are like,
Yeah.
oh shit, that
But-
is a beautiful little thing there.
And oh my goodness, I almost forgot before we get started. I just got to say, huge beanie refried thank you to patron Zac Shwartz, who kindly suggested Schenectady, New York, and patronized us at the appropriate level to get this movie on the roster. Thank you, Zach. I'm very happy to be talking about it. So yeah, just wanted to get that out of the way. Zac Shwartz, you're awesome. But to nutshell it, which is difficult to do, but I think I can do in 10 seconds. If you haven't seen it at all, because it's his least seen film, I think. The others being John Malkovich, an adaptation, which was his hit, but still not like a real hit.
Charlie Kaufman doesn't get
Well,
hits.
he wouldn't be Charlie Kaufman anymore if he had a big hit.
Right.
Eternal Sunshine, I would say.
Oh, I take it back. You're right.
I would say it's the kind of thing that my parents have heard of,
Right.
and I think
You
they've
don't
seen.
think that's Michel Gondry though?
Oh, yeah, hard
That's
to say.
like he was in his
It's
heyday.
very Kaufman,
It's
though.
yeah, of course.
It's a meld. But
But
we're
that's
not-
something
yeah.
we've all said about Kaufman when we read a Kaufman script. This is very Kaufman.
But we're here to nerd it up. Well, usually there's a character named Kaufman in it who says, this is very Kaufman.
Hoi.
But we're going to nerd it up about his densest, least accessible, most overlooked film, which I do think is a true visionary masterpiece, Synecdoche, New York. And in a nutshell, it's about Phillip Seymour Hoffman, who plays a man, I mean, you could compare it to Serious Man, a man who seems to have a cursed, terrible life, or at least that's certainly how he views it. It's up for debate whether it had to be that way. He's a famous play director. As his life gets worse and worse and worse, he also gets the chance, like an unlimited budget, to make a play. He decides to make the ultimate play that will encompass all of life. It ends up becoming increasingly nested meta-narratives where people playing him in the play that is about him. That also,
As he plays the person who's now playing
right.
him.
Yeah.
Outside, the world has ended. There's been some kind of apocalypse. The play ends with a person who's playing him, directing him playing that person, directing him to die, so he does. Credits. So
very
Holding on
very
to-
clear and
Holding on to the
run-of-the-mill.
person who's directing him's mother.
yes. Okay, well, we will unpack the final
Yeah,
moment in
no, there's-
detail. I'm not trying to rush us to the final moment, but I needed people who have no idea what they're talking about to know at least like, oh, okay, so it's some kind of artsy, hyper-symbolic, it's not naturalistic. Yeah, that's what we're dealing with here. And in between, all the secrets of life unfold before you.
Yeah.
So to layer onto that, how I describe this film is it's a movie where the plot is almost irrelevant. It doesn't matter about the characters. The idea of the film is what I find myself attached to, and it's the idea that the beginning is in the end. The name Synecdoche is a word that means encompasses the whole and the single. at the same time.
Yeah, like the Los Angeles Lakers or something like
Right,
that.
so
like
if
the
you
Lakers won.
The Lakers are
won.
a team, but they're also the whole team.
Yeah.
And
If you
it's-
say Los Angeles won last night, you actually mean the
Yes,
basketball
that's
team,
better,
the Lakers.
yeah.
But
the
you
one I
also
always heard
mean
in school
everyone-
is if the ship captain says all hands on deck, he means your whole body.
Right.
So now people know what a synecdoche is, and the movie never explains what
Oh,
it is.
is it about all of New York?
But it's not. Okay, I understand that any insights, but you have to know this as a director. You can boil any filmic symbol down to, oh, is friendship good? And like wink at it.
And if you ask Kaufman what's about to him, it's he wanted to make a movie about the fact that we're all going to die, the fact that we are living with this, all of us.
Yes.
Everyone listening, you're all going to die, and we all are pretending like we're not.
And that is stated explicitly, and that is one of the oldest, most banal questions, only because death has been with humanity forever.
It is a banal question that I think
that
is
he
done so
answers.
beautifully.
Yes, it's in the execution of the answer. And it's also for nerds. And I get that that is an appeal to Kaufman, because in the same way Arrested Development is not everyone's cup of tea, because there's like 40% of the jokes would work in any sitcom, and the rest are for comedy nerds who are paying close attention. There's so much shit in this that it's like a Where's Waldo for people who like film symbols, where you're just like, oh, that means that and that. Oh, that could be interpreted one of 5 ways, which also in itself is a synecdoche in a Schrodinger's cat sort of sense. Like, this is I wrote this note down there's a moment where it's in between. No, it's the fact that, okay, so in the final moment, the woman doesn't say, I'm the actress you hired to be in the dream and play Ellen's mom, who you're now playing. She says, I play the mom in Ellen's dream, which didn't look like it was shot on a set. So for the first time in the movie, someone is now breaking the actual fourth wall and saying to the audience, I'm the actress from this movie you're watching. And from that point forward, everything that happens is a quantum wave function, because it cannot be. It will never collapse until the moment of death.
And it is much worse. There is.
Oh my
there
God.
There is literally no way to describe. I'm watching this movie and I had a thought in my head and I went, God, am I overthinking it? And I went, oh no, it's a Kaufman movie. There's no way you can overthink it. There's no such thing in any of his films. I don't know if you ever saw Anomalisa.
That's the one missing link I am
I
dying to see.
adore Anomalisa. I think it's. Did you see it, Abe?
Yeah.
I thought the 3D printing concept was going to be like great.
Right.
Turns out it actually was part of the film and it made sense in the
I
medium.
thought that was the coolest
It's a
aspect of it.
Roger Ebert, I think. I can't remember who said it. Said Kaufman may not be the best writer, but he's the best script writer.
Right.
And it's because he understands the medium of film and he writes for the medium.
Well, he's constantly flexing the muscles of the medium to an extent that no single writer has. I mean, there's people like fucking James Joyce wrote like Finnegan's Wake in like 23 languages.
Equally
and-
inaccessible.
And
yeah.
it's like, there's books written about, like, let me just tell you how good this book is because you can't understand it unless you know 23 languages.
And this is a film.
fine.
This is a film for people who like deconstructing.
Yeah.
And there's no way we can't have moments. We're going to have to choose a moment and decide we're not going to digress. Because, as an example, I'm watching this last night to prep for this, and I see there's a scene. We're not going to talk about it right now. I'm just going to mention the scene and what happened, where Hazel says she's reading The Trial. And I go, this is the first time I've watched this movie a lot. And I go, The Trial, Kafka?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that changes everything. Like, this is this moment of like, because inside
They're
of,
all going to turn into bugs.
Inside of Kafka's The Trial, which I adore that
Great book.
It's a book that was written posthumously. Was that chosen for that reason, or was it chosen because of the story of the actual trial, where he's going from building to building to building, trying to?
Oh yeah, that's true.
Or is it also that inside of The Trial, there's another book that is being talked about, where the priest talks to him and says that there's the gate. I'm just like, I'm now not talking about the film.
But also the fact that they created a nested thought is itself a reference to the nested structure
and
of
it's
the movie.
one sentence.
And I do think that the whole point of, I used to do this all the time when I was a kid, is imagining God, or whatever you want to call it, any entity that can look in my mind and know what I'm thinking. And I would always get stuck in this house of mirrors where like, but I know that they know what I'm thinking, but they know that I know. And you get this house of mirrors effect. And I think Kaufman knows what I'm talking about and is trying to apply that to death. You know, humans are all nested reflections of each other. Everyone is everyone, which is a line said twice in the film. and yet you are also trapped alone on your own journey. You will die alone.
You're not the star of your own play. Everyone's the star of each other's plays,
and yet I don't think he's saying Caden is right ultimately. I think till the last moment of his life, Caden is choosing to focus on the negative side of the fact that we'll all eventually die. But Kaufman also shows that there is a positive side to death.
This is why I'm just going to have to debate every fucking thing you say at this point.
Oh, you disagree with that?
No, I don't necessarily disagree, but we could take the first 5 minutes of this movie and deconstruct how the entire film is done and how everything means. Specifically, my thing with Caden is I don't think he looks at the worst in things. I think what he's doing is he makes small problems gigantic. Conversely, for his wife, Adele, who makes giant things tiny. And so it's that juxtaposition throughout the entire film we see, and his way of making small things gigantic, slowly he actually over time starts to see actually that it is the small things.
Right, but also, right. Okay,
and so
my
he starts
on
building,
that,
and so he has the moment where the actor who's playing him says that his wife Adele is the true artist who was unafraid to confront it because she's able to look truth, see big things as very small, and able to continue just living life as we see she does. We don't actually see her again. She dies almost off screen, like nothing. Right. So how does her life and that coalesce with Caden as he... Oh, God, there's no way to describe this movie.
May I respond? Yeah.
Sorry.
No. So I see that layer, but for me, the more cogent layer is I do think Caden is someone who has major depressive disorder because he very systematically only wants things he doesn't have. That's why he cares about Olive only after she's out of her life and doesn't care about his second daughter. Alternates between whether he wants Hazel and Adele, depending on who he's with. Wants to be dead when he's alive, and I would argue wants to be alive when he's dead. But I do think the big small thing is there. And I also got to say, burn on Hereditary, like exact same imagery that Hereditary used. But I feel, and it's highly interpretable. So we're not really arguing, like you said. Everyone's like taking different pieces of the cheesecake.
There's no right way to look at this movie.
But the message I got from the idea that he keeps thinking he knows how to do the play, and ultimately what he lands on is the play can only reflect life if it expands to encompass the entire Earth and everyone on Earth as a cast member. And to me, that's the same as arriving at a central truth I have arrived at a lot in my life, which is it sounds dumb to just say it is what it is, but that's a profound truth. Everything in life, if you analyze it ultimately, there is only context. You know what I mean? Everything is a unique thing happening now, and it manifests in a unique way. And all our brains try to do is compartmentalize and make rubrics to figure the world out by applying rules of thumb. But that's not true. The only actual true wisdom would have to encompass every instance of everything in the universe.
And we see Caden throughout the entire film. He shifts from a hyper-analytical overuse of everyone. It's one of my favorite scenes. The whole movie's filled with my favorite scenes. I'm going to say it a lot. I apologize ahead of time for being that guy. When he's talking to the young actor playing Willie Loman. Mm-hmm. And he says to him, try to keep in mind a young person playing Willie Loman thinks he is only pretending to be at the end of a lifetime filled with despair. But the tragedy is that we, the audience, know that you, the young actor, will end up in this very place of desolation. And that overthinking of everything. And then at the end of the film, he sees the same young actor.
And I just have to say that's a symptom of depression because he's not assuming just that the guy will die, but that this actor will grow to be as bitter and lonely as he is. That is a depressive point
And on top
of
of it, he's telling him how to be the young actor, which the guy is a young actor. So theoretically, however he is the way.
He constantly tells that guy, just walk like yourself, and the guy can't do it.
Yeah, and that's how he ends it, is he goes, that's not natural. Just walk like, I just want you to be yourself. Yeah. That's what he says at the end, because
don't take a note and turn into a completely different fucking person.
Yeah.
Oh,
thank God. We got to let Abe talk.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. I'm enjoying this. I don't like the film as much. This is 2 in a row, and I feel bad because it's not always the case. The most truest thing in this movie happens right away, which is when he's listening to the radio in like the first sequence, and the French woman comes on and is describing her art on whatever art radio station he's listening to.
Poetry, yeah.
He's reading a real poem, famous. This is also like Moby Dick levels of literary references.
Right.
Oh,
right.
This whole thing.
It's a real poem.
Yeah, it's getting real McSweeney.
Whoever has no house now will never have one. Whoever is alone now
and she
will
says
stay alone.
fall is a melancholy season because it's the realization you are no longer in bloom. Every day a reminder that all you have left is to deteriorate. And I thought that that's cool, especially because the film itself is 2X. So you have, even though it's not doing like a whole year, it's kind of doing like in terms of getting to know Phillip Seymour Hoffman's character. We go from like spring into summer, and then we go into fall and then winter, and that's kind of like
Technically, the movie happens in the same minute.
Sure. Sure.
But or like Genesis.
Sorry.
Like Genesis can be
This
interpreted.
fucking book. This
I'm
fucking
just like,
movie is
No. But
it's like
I would say technically all you
love
can
it.
say is it either happened in 1 minute or he happened to die in the same minute.
It happened in the same moment because the movie starts at 7:45, and the last thing we see is graffiti on the wall that says 7:45.
Right, but that doesn't mean that. Like in real life, if I was born and died at 7:45,
I don't think we can
20
have a
years
discussion
apart,
about real life.
Well, here's the thing. Like, here's what I'm getting to is there are good parts of this. You gave a very compelling argument for like it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly unhappy because he has some kind of part of him that is thriving only when he's in need of something.
But
I get that.
yeah.
and he's reaching
therefore,
out early on about sadness.
The biggest need he's going to want is going to be the best art, the great American novel, the great play, or whatever. So it needs to be perfect, and it drives him nuts.
Like
and it's
Sullivan's Travels.
Yeah, and at one point they're like, we worked on it in 17 years. When are we going to get an audience in here? So it's the self-deterioration that we do when we think we're not in fall, when we think we're in summer.
So at the same time, the way time passes in this film itself is something that's worth discussing, because it's not that 17 years pass, it's not that 20 years pass. The way that it's shot and the way that it's filmed, for the viewer, 2 hours pass. The film starts on October 12th, and then when he picks up the newspaper, it's October 14th. And then it says the milk expires October 20th. He says it's gone bad. He sees, goes back to another newspaper. It's even later in the month. And then suddenly it's after Halloween.
Well, also the date on the paper doesn't even correspond to the date he says it is.
No, because everything,
his time is fluid.
his time is fluid, and it's a play. Kaufman's talked a bit about this. It's a play on how our memories work. And so he has that early scene is basically a sort of representation of what every breakfast was for years for him, which was there's the wife with the daughter, and then he's in there with the newspaper reading banal, shitty stories, and how we don't remember every breakfast. That's not how it works. We don't remember one breakfast all the way through. We remember an amalgamation of them, and we get to experience this amalgamated memory all the way through, and that's important because as we start talking about Olive's deathbed scene, for example, where she says you had a homosexual relationship with Eric, that happened. We can talk about it. He did actually have a repressed homosexual relationship with a guy named Eric, especially when he was Ellen, which is a sentence that doesn't make sense to anyone.
Well, yeah, but it's the question,
was he Ellen or not?
No, is it Eric from the scene with the actress who plays Ellen in it? Or is it Eric from the book Winky? There's 3 Erics. I forget the third, but there's 3 potential Erics. Yeah.
It probably wasn't the one from the book Winky because he killed himself at 5 years old.
But
is
the writer
but they
of
end up-
Winky wrote.
He's at a
Yes.
bus stop, and they end up finding out there's a novelization being made into a film that stars a guy that looks exactly like him,
Caden.
called Winky and Eric. And you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So it's the way time passes is intended to be the fault of our memories, how we perceive things, how we look back, how we look forward.
Right.
It's intended to be throughout very much a play on how life passes us, which is, to me, if there's an underlying thing, and it's, I watch this movie, I cry. I'm just a sap for very few movies. This one gets to me. And it's just literally the passage of time, how we lose friends, how people move in and out of our lives when we don't even realize it. We did the thing. Did they do the thing? With Caden, did his wife leave him or did he leave his wife? Truth is not clear cut like that. The reality is we lose relationships. They come in and out. We make our way through, and eventually they die. Like it says at the end, where is everyone? Oh, mostly dead or
Somewhere.
gone.
Yeah,
Some
I
gone.
love that. I love the time stuff. I just can't get on. Like I don't hate, but I don't really fuck with Act 2 in this. I don't like it so much just because it's so much about someone who's just completely run by insecurity that it just feels too self-indulgent. Like I love
Kaufman film that's self-indulgent.
Right. I love it when it's like making like your comment about the breakfast. I'm like, that is something that's relatable for everyone. I don't need to be making a self-aware novel or something like that in order to prove that to you.
And yet you love Finnegan's Wake.
I don't love Finnegan's
Oh,
Wake.
you used to talk about it for years.
I like Ulysses,
that's
but
the one.
that's because I took
But that's
a class.
very inaccessible too.
That's very inaccessible.
Yeah.
That's also because I was a child and I read it and was like, this is real craft happening.
I just think it's fun to learn things. Like when you get a companion guide.
Yeah.
If you crack a new secret, if you're that type of person, it's just fun to go, oh, a connection.
No,
I know what they meant. Yeah.
in no way negative against the analysis
like
that's
nerdy
happening
movies,
here. I'm
right.
just saying, like, if the analysis is like it has
Well, so
a
let's-
character
let's-
that I
let's
don't.
do
No,
this
no,
then.
it's my turn. It's
All
my
right.
turn. Because I've been holding this since Abe last went. To bounce off, I think I can better elucidate quickly why it is what it is so profound, is that the movie is not just showing loneliness and that death severs connection. It's showing that in life we sever connection, and it is difficult to fight that trend because the reality and the manifest reality of things, as Brooks just pointed out, is filtered both through our perceptive organs and then storytelling, because we only encode memories as stories. They're not fully reliable. So how do you find a state of connection to anything, or are you just a vat in a jar? And I would argue that a lot like Kafka or Brecht or Artaud, who they reference in this, their answer is kind of on the existentialist side. It's like, well, if you find a way to feel that your life has meaning, then it does. Because the underlying meaninglessness of
Sure,
everything means
sure.
you can impart meaning or not. So I just think it is what it is profound.
So I'm gonna go back.
And he's not just saying it
And
is
that
what
is
it is.
the antagonist-
He's highlighting how the human experience puts barriers in the ways of you seeing what is.
I
So,
see
and
that.
to go back, one of the things you said earlier, again, this is going to happen a lot. I have a feeling through this. When you said earlier that he gets to the end of his discussion and he says, at the end of the film, and he's like, oh, I finally know how to do it. My interpretation is that Caden and all of that is very much about chasing the dragon, effectively, that we'll never actually, he's trying to find a thing that we'll never be able to have.
Just like how we spend our
It's
whole
a-
lives trying to be the best self we can be, but we'll always be flawed till we die.
So the reason I think this is there's the scene where Hazel mentions the trial. The trial is Kafka. Inside of that is actually a book. There's a scene where a priest tells the story of it's called Before the Law, which actually was a separate
This is
novel.
the finale of the book, right? I think it's when he's in jail.
It is. The priest says basically the story about a man goes, I want to find the law, and the guard's there. He's like, I won't let you in. Not yet, but eventually. And he's like, oh, cool, I'll wait. And he's like, not yet. And the guy like waits and waits and waits. And then he's like, oh, I'm going to die now. Can I get in now? And he's like, nah, this door was just for you. And he locks it behind him and he leaves and the guy dies.
Yeah.
And the idea being that this idealist system, which is what Caden lives in, is like, I'm a bit of a materialist person myself. The idealist system is about finding things we can't actually have, we can't actually hold on to. And Caden's chasing that his whole life. And his realization at the end is just he dies having completely always been unfulfilled from the beginning.
Yes, and I do think, and I think it's supported merely by the fact that it's written by Charlie Kaufman, that there are through lines of concrete depressive disorder.
For sure.
Or like, I just think he has it, and the unreliable narrator stuff is definitely filtered specifically through that disorder.
Sure.
My favorite symbol of it is when he says, here's what's going to happen. Every day you'll get a new slip of paper to his actors, who are now in the thousands. And it will tell you what happened to you that day. And he starts to write, and it pans out, and you see millions of slips. And he describes it essentially as anything that could happen to a person. But if you read them, it's only bad things that could happen to a person.
Yeah, he's like the worst god.
He doesn't conceive that God could have an upturn in your life.
Yeah, I mean, look no further than the fact that in the movie he has 90 different ways of like his body deteriorating. Yet
He shit's gray at the
Yet
end.
he thinks
I've never seen your shit gray before.
Yeah, it's new.
That's new.
Yeah, there's definitely a very like palpable, like he cares about other people dying, but he doesn't care about himself.
And yet he propounds that he's terrified of it, and it's the core of his being.
Exactly.
Is it that he cares about other people dying, or that there's a scene where he gets a phone call, about 7 words are said ish. Like you don't hear him, you just hear, and then he rolls over, and I find it to be almost comedic.
It's hilarious.
And where he says, "That was my father died. They said he had cancer throughout his body. He went in. He didn't know. His finger hurt. It was the most painful death they'd ever seen. He called out my name. I wasn't there." Like it's like
they said
they fucking didn't do that. They didn't tell you shit.
Because he only heard for a second, and he goes, "They said it was the saddest, most pathetic deathbed speech any of them had ever heard."
Yeah. And then it cuts to his mom, and his mom goes, "There was so little left of him. They had to pack the rest of the coffin with cotton." And then it cuts to a coffin. It's this little baby coffin.
He has a child size. His dad's buried in a child size coffin.
Which is I like that parallel also. And once again, it's all that, like, to me, this movie is about kind of something different, or I focused on something different. The Michelle Williams character, Claire, his second wife, she's all about him. She's like, "What are you doing next? What? Oh, that's so perfect. That's such a good note. You're such a genius." And then they're walking out in the alley, and she said, "My mom died." And he goes, "Oh my God, why didn't we talk about that first?" And she goes like,
"No big deal."
Yeah. She's like, "Yeah, it sucks, but whatever." And it's just like, I don't know who to blame in that situation, but I know that I can blame safely the high artistry conglomerate that makes up people who want to talk about things that are like higher than the normal conversation of pulp.
Right.
The high art kind of genres.
Right, because you even see him he has this abstract idea that Hazel is the one he was destined to be with.
Right.
And when they meet, their conversations are bizarrely hollow because they don't actually haven't logged time together.
They've just flirted.
And I think
superficially.
I think he loves Hazel because she has the thing he doesn't really have, which is like
optimism.
She moves into a house that's on fire eternally and says, "Well, I'm really just worried about dying in the fire."
Well, how you choose your death is an important thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a dude who lives in the basement, and you're like, that seems like also bad. Then it turns out she has a long, rewarding marriage to the dude in the basement.
Right.
And
I have to say, though,
and lives like a long, healthy life. So I really got from that this time that it's like, in this one way, she's the anti-Caden, because in your life, sometimes I do feel cursed, and it exacerbates that you perceive someone you know as like, and they take fucking risks all the time, and none of this bad shit happens to them. She represents that, yes, everyone lives in a burning house. You can only really put it out of your mind. You have to do that.
Right. Well, it all depends on your outlook of the second half of your life. How when you start slipping into fall and winter, you can deny it and be scared of it, or you can accept it and keep,
because she
trying to make positive
die
elements.
of smoke inhalation, but way later than you would expect, and she lived a much nicer life than Caden did.
Yes.
Well, we don't know that.
Or that's his
that can
imagination.
be a fabrication.
I go back, the reason he fell in love with her and says she's the one is she's also the only one of the women he never got to know. And as Adele says very pointedly, "Oh, I guess everyone becomes disappointing the more that you know them."
Yeah.
And
he always wants whatever's on the opposite side. He says he'd rather be a woman because he's a man. Then he gets to be a woman, and he's not notably happier.
No, because and I could see how it's because everything is through his lens, the whole entire movie. For all we know, none of this happens. Like you said, it's all a minute or whatever. Fucking whatever.
it was all a dream.
Yeah, it was all a dream. But it is relevant to mention that it could be his version of that. Like he put her on a pedestal and said, she represents optimism, and I hate her for it. But I also hate that I hate myself,
and that I can't,
and that I hate myself, and all these things. So it's a cleaner narrative for him.
Yes.
To be like, she went away, and I can just believe that she made a great thing, a mountain out of a molehill, and that's just what she always did.
Yeah.
When he finally sees her happy, she had a terrible life. When he finally sees her happy with her kids and family, he decides to kill himself.
Right.
And then later, when Sammy,
Yeah.
Caden 2, whatever.
Caden Prime.
Yeah, when Caden Prime is with her and he finally has his moment, actually, of pretty good happiness.
Yeah.
He decides to kill himself. Sammy, who's playing Caden
but
as a point.
That's because in that moment she goes back to him. I also think it's very intentional that she goes back to, quote unquote, the real Caden. Because Sammy... Phillip Seymour Hoffman does not smile. There's one light chuckle. I noted that. Sammy smiles and then suddenly stops, I think that's a code for when he's in and out of character. So you kind of get the impression that on some level, there was some way where the real Sammy and the real Hazel connected in a way that Caden could never.
Yes.
And so it's like even sadder on that level. I also,
Well,
to go back to the balcony scene where Sammy is telling Caden, your wife's a better artist than you could ever hope to be. Your shitty ex-wife. I love how that's dual interpretive, because your interpretation was correct, is that, well, that could be Sammy dropping character, like Sammy really thinks that. But also, Sammy is playing Caden and knows that Caden hates himself, so that is what Caden would say to himself.
It is what a version of Caden would say to himself.
Yes.
And that's, so again, to Abe's point, this movie you could bifurcate very cleanly. Mm-hmm. It is a beginning and opening that I think is a very good character study, like much more grounded. Then the moment that play hits, it becomes magical realism.
Yeah, it's a tesseract of one person.
And there's a million ways to go over that part. But, oh God, there's a million ways to go over that.
I think that's, in a way, that's kind of what Charlie Kaufman is trying to say, is that the second half of the movie, the fall-winter months, you're going to take however you want from this mess, this maze of logic and emotions, whatever you want to grab on, and I'm going to put it all there, and it's going to be constant and unwavering and include everything and be unsure of what it's saying, so you can extrapolate the important parts yourself, because that's what he's saying with the film. Now, that's cool in theory and all, but it also makes for boring fucking scenes.
Well, that's where I got to push back, because the thing we haven't highlighted at all, because we're all nerds for meaning, is, and you can disagree and say that's why you thought it was boring. I actually also think it's freaking hilarious.
Me too.
Like,
it is hilarious
constantly. Just so we don't go the whole thing without like doing due diligence to Charlie Kaufman knows how to write funny dialogue. Yeah. I'll skip to the first one I have highlighted. The doctor says,
"Therapist,
we need to send you to a neurologist." Doctor. Why? I thought,
ophthalmologist.
A neurologist, like brain stuff? What? We need to send you to the ophthalmologist. Oh, I thought you said neurologist. Cut to him at the ophthalmologist. The first line in the scene is, I think we need to send you to a neurologist. So it's like the deadliness was held at bay.
The eyes are part of the brain.
Yeah.
Are they?
I love in the car.
Are they? That doesn't seem true. Why would I say it if it wasn't true? Just doesn't feel right. As in morally correct or accurate? Accurate, I guess. Interesting. Makes a note in his chart.
That. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's good dialogue.
My favorite, the therapist one, is the wife says,
I fantasized about Caden dying.
Can I say something just awful? Of course, it's therapy. I fantasized about Caden dying so I could just get a fresh start. Oh, Caden, I'm sorry. That's awful. Well, Caden, did that make you feel awful?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Good. Great.
Yeah. Or when she's on he's reading her book on the airplane. Mm-hmm. She's narrating it. And it goes, turn to your left. He turns to his left. She's sitting across the aisle from him, narrating the book live for him.
She's Tyler Durden.
She then flirts with him. Yeah. He rebukes her. He goes back to reading, and it says, well, you're not interested. I'm not interested in you. The book ends now. And that's it. The rest of the pages are blank.
Yeah. Boy, you guys would love Dave Eggers.
Yes.
100 Years of Solitude is my favorite book of all time, and it would shit like that would
great.
fit right home.
Because that's a scene right out of A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, where he like looks to his left and there's a motorcyclist and is like, you're not gonna do well. You're like, your life is fucked now that your parents are dead. And he's like, oh. How do you know about that? I like the line just because it's one of those things about like I always not having a child of my own, but I like to always imagine having a child as little like idiosyncrasies of language with his Catherine Keener and Phillip Seymour Hoffman with Little Olive. Mm-hmm. I don't want blood. I don't want blood. You don't have blood, honey. I don't think you should tell her that she doesn't have blood.
Yeah.
It's just a good thing.
I don't know what I'm doing. And then Claire says, but that's so great, because knowing that you don't know, that's the first step to knowing, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so much good dialogue.
Those are just like wonderful games of language.
Frankly, they remind me of Coen Brothers dialogue.
Yeah, they absolutely do.
That's the highest praise I can give to
dialogue. the playfulness of the language and the humor of that is something that I'll always be like, he knows how to write.
At Claire's mom's funeral, she says, this is the 1-2 punch of like, that's so true and makes me so sad, and then it's immediately funny. She sobs for like 3 seconds and then goes, I used to be a baby. And he goes, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's the only response.
For your babiness.
Well,
Or
for the fact that we all have to age.
Yeah.
When he finally finds where Olive has apparently been hiding after he chases Maria.
Yeah, let's get into that scene.
Yeah, so his daughter's been taken away by Adele. Or it hasn't, and he left them, however you want to interpret it. He finds Maria, he chases her down, gets in there, he finds this like torn down garbage-filled dump, but he sees the one gift he gave, which
The pink box.
The pink box with the nose on it. And instead of just crying, he bends back and he pulls out eye drops. And he
Prescription eye drops.
They say like
Well, because the doctor earlier has said you'll lose the ability to
Imitation-
salivate and
Yeah.
cry.
it's like imitation tears
it's
or something.
imitation tears
Yeah.
because he can't cry now.
And yet this is the part of the movie where he should cry.
He should cry,
Yeah,
so he
and
does. And then it cuts to him immediately bawling his eyes out and screaming.
And because it's Phillip Seymour Hoffman,
It's heart-wrenching.
he's such a good actor
Yeah.
Oh, it's-
that if you cut that shot, it makes you cry. With that shot, it makes you laugh, which itself is Brechtian and makes you realize the grammar of filmmaking and storytelling, like draws attention to it again. It's beautiful.
He does that really throughout the entire film. There's so many little nods.
Something I wanted to bring up that I read is that Charlie Kaufman, and this is maybe my favorite thing about his particular brand of eccentricity. So like adaptation, he was really asked to write a spec script adapting The Orchid Thief.
Right.
Instead, if you've seen it, he brought you this crazy meta narrative about him split into 2 separate people trying to write the adaptation, where he actually slanders the author of the real book, like implies that she's like sex crazed and steals orchids, which is all fabricated.
Right.
And it involves, of course, the level where you realize one brother wrote the first part of the movie and the other brother wrote blah, 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 blah. He has said, and I don't know how much he exaggerates his own mythos, but this really made a lot of things align to me. He said in some interviews that this screenplay came from someone asking him to write a straight genre horror film. And that makes so much sense to me because it's this scene, the olive scene is the one that I was really like, I can see Charlie Kaufman sitting in his study going, a clown that slits your throat is not what I'm scared of. What would I be scared of?
Having to write a horror
That my
movie?
daughter grows up to be a famous 10-year-old prostitute who hates me. And there's nothing I can do. And that scene destroys me, dude. Because
brutal.
It's her extracting. She says, before we die, I just want to be able to forgive you.
Yeah.
But to forgive you, you have to admit you did this, this, and this, and this. All this evil shit that she thinks he did, and we don't know if he really did or not. And
He finally pushes it out of himself.
he goes, okay,
And
I
she
did
said-
it.
It's such a powerful
Please
moment.
forgive me.
Oh.
And she says no.
No.
And then dies.
And dies. And says, like, you know your ex-wife's shitty friend you hate?
There she is.
She's been fucking me since I was like 7 years old.
Yeah.
She taught me to be a woman. And he's like, God. And like the idea that you're always going to be sick, but you're never going to die soon. It's just going to get worse and worse, and you don't know what the deal is. The faucet straight up smash. I love that the faucet hits him in the head very early in the movie, blood spurting. And she says, don't look at it. You look horrible. And he reflexively immediately grabs the mirror and looks at it. He wants to know what the damage is.
Yeah.
And yet, when he goes to the doctor and gets the stitches, he said, I'd prefer if there wasn't a scar. Well, sure, we'd all like to be impervious to the consequences of tragedy, but, you know.
Well, and the other thing I love about the Olive moment sort of throughout is she obviously is growing up at a normal pace of a human being because she's a human being. But as he's reading her diary, she is eternally that little girl until he sees that she's an older woman. And at that point, the diary, which is a child's diary written by a child, is now voiced by the adult woman.
Which logically can't have new entries because she left that house.
And
when she
there's
was
no
10,
way
right?
she's talking about how great Germany is and how she's living there and how much she hated Papa and how he smelled funny. And it's
So it's
such
either
an odd...
The Notebook, where it's an actual magic time diary where her inner monologues appear, or it's what he thinks she thinks,
Yeah.
which is more viable. I also love that it starts so slowly because the first thing is that she gets a full body tattoo at age 10.
Oh my God.
And he's against that. And you are too because she's 10, but it's also not where it will eventually reach. It's not like the pinnacle. It's the first step of the horror. But ultimately, she dies of the tattoo because it turns out the tattoo was poison. So he was like, I was right and I could have stopped this, or it's all in his head. But this either way,
And again,
it
we
makes
go
sense.
to one of the core messages of the whole film, which is the end is built into the beginning.
Right.
When Hazel buys her house, it's on fire. It's not that she buys a house on fire. It's not that she buys a house with a dude in the basement. Conceptually, she does, and that's what we see. But what is happening is the decisions we make, we don't know that the end is already built into it. She bought the house. She's going to die in that house.
Yeah.
She bought the house, and it happens to be that the realtor's son is around, and she marries that guy because it's the inevitabilities, the sheer momentum of life keeps going. And that's it. The tattoo kills his daughter. It's the end is built into the beginning throughout.
Pure. Also, just if you're a Phillip Seymour Hoffman fan, though, like Catherine Keener, I like just as much, but she doesn't get as much play in this. Hoffman is just a joy to watch. Like, even if you agree with Abe that it's kind of boring, you got to watch the scenes, like the scene where he's in
amazing.
Germany and confronts Maria and attacks her in public and goes like, "With a."
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's Mystic River shit. Is my daughter in there?
Yeah.
But Hoffman's better than Sean
Yeah, no,
Penn.
I'm not trying to fault the movie. I just think it's funny that I just think that there's just now a kind of in the same way that we do to Tarantino, where it's just like you watch a movie and you have the expectation, you're like, all right, when is someone just gonna randomly get shot out at like the right of frame? Like what the expectation of violence, he's created a grammar for us to watch Tarantino movies in the same way Charlie Kaufman has trained us to watch Charlie Kaufman movies.
He has his own
Sure.
language.
Yep.
For
and
sure.
and I think that that's fine. I think it's fine to have
highly
ones.
academic language.
It's just so
But
highly
it doesn't
academic that
yeah.
it's you need to I don't know. I like to knock people off their horses a little
Sure.
bit in terms of that.
But I think
because
people
it's
might hear
not
that-
saying something drastically different than even the way it makes a big deal about how much it's not pulp.
No, it's just crafted, and I think that's the
But it's
point of
still good.
adaptation, because adaptation
Yeah.
is about his desire to make it in this business by selling out, and his desire to achieve the abstract perfect art form, and how you must eventually just synthesize
Right.
them in some ratio. I think he's constantly writing about that.
Right.
And
and
I
we
just
see
think all the detail level work
The detail level
is
works great.
just because that's what he likes to do. Like, you know what I mean? I don't think it makes it deeper than a simpler movie that had the same point. I just like it because I can nerd out about it.
and
he
within
likes
the
it for the same
context of it
reason.
being a
And it's-
Kaufman movie, you get to
Yeah.
do things there. The layers, one of the things that's a very common theme is the roles we play and the faces we wear, kind of in all of his movies in
Yeah.
some way. And this movie is about that in a much more outward fashion. And the roles, who am I? What character am I playing today? Who am I going to pretend to be? Which Brooks is going to be on the Michael Swaim podcast? Which Michael Swaim is going to be here? Because I'm this way with this person. I'm a different person with this guy. There's a natural reality to how we be as people that I think Kaufman has always tried to enact. I think this is his best version of that. Abe may disagree, but I think this is very much that same core message.
Sorry. Plus, it's just fun to get to write synopsis of stuff that's true. That's like, at the venue, Claire tries to imply to Caden that Sammy is a sexual predator, but Sammy, playing Caden, tells her that Sammy is the best actor in the play. Zoom out to show Caden, who has handed Claire her latest tragedy slip, which says, "You think you might be gay." And she seems to drop character and says, "Fuck this," both to Sammy and Caden. This pulls out further to reveal that Caden is giving them notes on how well they just played this scene in which she breaks character and gives Caden notes.
Yeah.
It's so good. So good.
And when he's standing outside of the fake Claire apartment and he says, "This is all lot," after they break up.
Wall it all up.
Wall it all up. And it becomes a city. It becomes a city inside of us. It's just,
Well, the play in New York become one and the same, like a Synecdoche is.
but there's always the warehouse over the top, which
But it's
I
also,
adore.
The title is also, I think, saying, yes, and every movie is trying to be a simulacrum of life, which is too vast to condense into a story. And every life is trying to be more than can be fit into one life. Everything's in reference to something larger because that's the way our brains happen to work. We see everything as reference to something.
Speaking of
you-
simulacrum, the names of the play are another wonderful.
They get increasingly stupid. I love it.
The transmissible diseases of cattle is infectious diseases of
cattle is the final title.
The final title, and I just love.
But before that, an obscure moon lighting an obscure world. And she's like, I think it's a little much. Yeah, it
Well,
is.
how about
That's the only
simulacrum?
time he chuckles after he and Hazel make love. Yeah, it's probably too much.
It's very the discreet charm of the bourgeoisie.
yeah. Damn. I could go forever. Okay, so we can gauge our shit. We got 15 minutes left, roughly.
Okay.
Brooks, I know how much this means to you. Is there like a new thread you want to start on or a scene? We should probably talk about the end scene.
Yeah, I think it's. I would love to talk about the end scene, and then I did a lot of reading and research for this, trying to see who wrote what people did analysis, because it's the kind of movie. My favorite thing I read is actually by Roger Ebert, so I want to be able to make sure we get back to that. But anyway, we get back to the ending. The film, everything starts falling apart. You see him. Eventually, he becomes Ellen. He becomes the cleaning woman. Mm-hmm. His ex-wife Adele has died. He kind of just lives in this walk-in closet now.
Right, and
Ellen has
an actress who he previously hired to play Ellen, who's now playing him,
who's wonderful. By
directs
the way,
him. She's
amazing.
Great.
Diane
but
Weiss?
I just love this meta aspect. She's directing him on what Ellen feels, but she also is not the original Ellen. So she's a conduit. She's getting in touch with another character and immediately just feeding that character out to the next person in the chain.
same way that Sammy is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Sam, just real quick, Sammy is one of my favorite sort of character actors. This is my favorite role of his, but being the bad guy in Last
Tom
Action
Noonan.
Hero is amazing. And then going from that to this, I think is incredible.
Oh, he's got range. Tom
the
Noonan's
dude's
got
ridiculous. But so it's Ellen's now directing him, and so you have this narrative thread. He puts an earpiece in, and you hear her over this crackly sort of FM radio sounding voice directing him. Now get up, now stand, look out the window, read the card. She's saying what he's going to do next. He does nothing that she doesn't direct. Period. That's
it's a simulacrum of a life.
It's brutal. The ending, and I mean, we're going to have to discuss what the ending means, but. Just to really quick go over, she starts directing him. He makes his way out into this world outside of where his play was. We're no longer in the same area as his play. We're outside of the building where his play was taking place in the warehouse. Mm-hmm. The world apocalypse, everyone's dead.
Although, would you agree with me that by the very final moment, there is no inside and outside? The play is the world?
I think so. And I think, I just mean that literally the warehouse.
Yes.
I think he's outside of that. And we're getting real sky, even though all of it has become ultimately his play.
And I think you very pointedly see one real plant. So you're like, okay, this is the real outside.
Yes. Yeah. But then you see also a Caden on the dead on a table. Which is super,
that's right.
Super weird. And I
totally forgot
don't
about
even
that.
ask me what the hell that means at this point.
Yeah, I didn't block that out.
And he looks at it for a moment. And then you move on.
All right. Well, she tells him, keep moving.
Keep moving.
Yeah.
And so he keeps going. And then eventually he sees the only actress, like you said earlier, the only person who breaks that fourth wall.
The real, quote unquote, fourth wall.
Yeah, our fourth wall, if there is one, and we aren't literally part of this movie.
This is
fucked up reality.
This is a wall right now. And now the podcast, the listeners, we want to include you on your thoughts.
Shit, we don't even exist.
We're recursive to the bottom. He makes his way to a couch. He talks about, and this is a million ways to debate. He talks about how he wished he had the picnic with his daughter, and
which is what Ellen wishes.
Which is what Ellen wished, and then Ellen's mom's the one there, and he says, "You look older. You look older. Now apologize," Ellen says, and so he apologizes, and then he says, "Oh, I know how to do it. I know how to do it now." Talking about the play, and then as he finishes that sentence, Ellen says, "Die," and then fade to white, and we're done. And that's the end of the movie.
And then 3 seconds of silence, and then my mom, who was watching with me, goes, "She's kind of mean."
Yeah.
And I'm like, that wasn't really. She had to make him die. That was his time to die.
It was his time.
She's like, I think she made him die because she's mean.
There's that squeaky one line that's relevant to what you just said, Brooks, which is the when on this, because they missed the opening night, but on the second night of the Death of a Salesman play, when Adele doesn't give a standing ovation, and they're walking back, and
that's awkward.
They're with the parents, and his dad asks, "Why do all the old people look so young?" Which is exactly what your mom was like. Your mom missed the point.
Yeah,
it was
but
a choice.
The question is very relevant.
And she goes like, remember, this is the thing Charlie Kaufman wrote after adaptation.
Yeah.
His shitty ex-wife asks, "Wouldn't you rather write something original than adapt something?"
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like if Charlie Kaufman was in the room with your mom, that he would be like, "Yes,
and she
yes,
goes,
why?"
And she
why?
goes off.
So
Adele
mean.
in that scene goes off about how he needs to have his own voice. But that's Kaufman talking to himself. This movie's fucked up.
Oh, speaking of Kaufman talking to himself, I noticed just like pure satisfaction to me is there's a point where he says to Sammy, because Sammy's crushing on Hazel, but the real Hazel, not the girl playing Hazel.
Facsimile.
And he's in love with real Hazel, but has never done anything about it his whole life. He goes to Sammy, don't flirt with Hazel. And he goes, but I'm you. If you like Hazel, I like Hazel. And he goes, but this Hazel doesn't exist for you. Yeah. If you want to like a Hazel, like that Hazel. He's literally talking to himself and figuratively saying advice he should hear, but he will only interpret one level of it. He will not hear the wisdom behind that he's saying to himself.
Right. So he's creating a system for reality to play, and he still can't find the correct format of reality that makes him happiness.
Yeah.
Like, so no matter if he's unhappy in the real world, he'll be unhappy in his facsimile of the world.
Yeah, and it's
like that he's not learning his lessons.
It's expanded out. My other favorite inside the world fourth wall is when he says, I need someone else to play me, and that's when Ellen, the woman who plays Ellen, comes up and she goes, I could do it. Yeah. I know it's non-traditional casting. And he goes, what? And she goes, well, I've been watching you and I think I understand you. Really, you understand me. And she launches into this. I won't remember it exactly. I just know that it's...
I have the quote. I don't mean to interrupt, but
please
if you want
do,
it,
because it's just
then I'll
awful.
shut up. Caden, I understand you. You're a man already dead. Caden lives in a half-world between stasis and anti-stasis. Up until recently, he tried valiantly to make sense of this situation, but now he's turned to stone.
And he looks at her and he goes,
sounds good.
Yeah, that's about right. Like it's none of it's done spectacularly. What she's saying to him is prophetic and interesting and dark and deep. She's saying it just like, no, I'm talking about a character, blah, blah. Right. And here's like, yeah, okay, that's pretty much true.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit.
Which, by the way, is also how Sammy got the job, but he expressed the opposite side of that coin. Sammy expressed a true thing that was insightful about Caden's longing versus giving up. His was, he goes, I don't think you're right to play me, Sammy. And he turns to Hazel and goes, Hazel, I pray that someday we will become a flesh chimera, penis and vagina eternally fused, four eyes that can only look at each other. Oh. And he goes, okay, you can play me.
Yeah. Oh, shit. But to go back to the funeral, because you did say that the guy who played Peter Gregory is the priest.
Yes, the thing I started to saying was a third act speech that happens right after this,
and
given by a guy playing it.
It's his dad's funeral.
It's his dad's funeral occurring within his play.
Yeah, within his play that his dad's attending because he remembered seeing sort of his dad at his mom's funeral, and there's an actor playing. There's levels, but what happens? I love the scene so much because it's again very evocative in my mind of how memories work and the rosiness. What he remembers and what he perceives as this beautiful prophetic moment that exists with rain. The preacher says something truly powerful, and you read it in a sentence. This amazing monologue that is more powerful now that half these characters have passed in real life. Mm-hmm. It's amazing, and all the rain falls. It's just beautiful. That's not how the funeral happened at all. No. It was the least prestigious.
He was awkward and out of place like he always is.
And so it's this. It's I just love how those juxtapositions happen. But it's worth reading the priest.
Oh, sure. Just
because I love it. I love that line.
While alive, we wait in vain, wasting years waiting for a phone call or letter or look or something to make it all right, but it never comes. Or it does, but it doesn't really. So you spend your life in vague despair. And he gets madder and madder and talks. It's a little too long to read it, but he's like I didn't type it all, but he's like, and it's so fucking unfair. And I think it ends with, and when people even seem like they're trying to help you, it's like, do they really want to help you, or are they just making themselves feel better? Maybe they don't even want to access my grief because they have grief of their own. Well, you know what? Fuck everyone then.
And I go back to
it's a priest.
Hazel starts reading the trial.
Yeah,
that is the meaning of the
message
trial.
of the trial.
The message of the trial, almost perfectly. And she says, "I feel stupid. I never saw this book before." And he goes, "You're not stupid." Like it's this moment of like that. To me, that's like Kaufman's. Hey, no, this is accessible. I know my head is way up my own ass. Like I know when I watch this and I'm overanalyzing it, I know where my head is. I'm not. This is not a normal person addressing a normal film. But it's not about anyone being stupid. This is just kind of how life is. I find it.
He's choosing to look at irreducible complexity, and that's always going to become dizzying eventually. Yes. Speaking of Alan, I mentioned the quantum waveform thing, but I have my note of like what I was trying to say is that part where he's playing Ellen, there's a scene where the old lady in the hallway who's now playing herself, who lets him into Adele's apartment, but on the set, we're now reenacting it. To reenact it, she comes up to him and says, "Ellen?" And he says, "Yes." Now, in reality, she's senile, and when he came up, he tricked his way into an apartment because she goes, "Are you Ellen?" And he said, "Yes." Now he's playing Ellen, so when she says, "Are you Ellen?" and he says, "Yes," they're accurate lines within the world of the play they're in. So I was saying that's the point at which there are truly divergent realities that cannot be collapsed until like he dies, or until conclusivity comes.
Or is it a matter of they're both equally true?
He's Ellen and not Ellen. He is Schrodinger's Ellen.
It's equally true that he tricked his way in, or that he just answered honestly, "Yes, I'm Ellen," because
or if time is a flat circle, he was always Ellen, therefore he wasn't lying when he said he was Ellen initially.
Or like originally, the first thing where we start seeing that happen is when he leaves Adele or Adele leaves him. Which one is the truth?
Yeah.
And like a lot of things in life, it's these two things happen. We don't know why. There's this power behind them. It's I adore this film. And again, we get to the end and it's the powerful moment about death. And I know I've had probably too much of my share of it in my life, but it's how we deal with mortality and how we think about it. I find it to just be a very powerful take on the entire thing.
I feel he gets away with a lot of choose your own adventure meaning. That's Kaufman laying it on the table saying, like, what is the interpretation? And I don't know why, but I have a stick up my ass about directors and storytellers should have a meaning, a specific meaning. Now, obviously, he does get a few of the times the meaning is there is no meaning.
It's a minority, but there's a proud tradition of movies that open the aperture of confusion just enough.
Yes.
That rather than having one clear message, they have 45 messages, some of which contradict each other. Like, I think Magnolia is also kind of
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think that there is a clear... Yeah, I would say Magnolia, which is one of my favorite films. Like, it definitely does that. It's just so... I think the meta-ness gets in the way of it for me to watch it from that standpoint. But I agree that the work is the same.
The meta-ness makes it more of like a comedic exercise because he also spends a lot of this showing off how fucking clever he is.
Right.
Because when you start following the nested structure and the camera just keeps pulling back and you're like, oh, that's the play. Oh, no, that's the play. That's kind of him showing off. I mean,
yeah.
And it does tickle. I mean, it's the thing I love about Kaufman is, to me, it tickles my brain in like that really, really fun way. And I'm not going to ever say that he's like the most powerful filmmaker. I cry at the end of this movie every time. I don't fucking know why. It tickles me, and I enjoy it in a happy, like, in my brain space. My brain is going, I really like this.
To me, it feels like when you solve a riddle and you get a little dopamine hit or whatever. Yeah, when you pick this stuff out. But as far as deeper meaning, I think the last thing I'll say on the subject is this is the only movie we've covered on frame rate ever. So I don't know if this means
ever
the director's at fault for not making the message clear and I'm just projecting my own thoughts. I believe the message really is encoded in there. It's open to interpretation as abstract art is. But this is the only frame rate we've ever done where I immediately came to an insight so profound that I hadn't had before that I wrote a little paragraph so that I wouldn't forget it. I'm going to read that and then I'm done.
Cool.
So right after the end of this, I wrote, oh shit. Caden says his whole goal in life is to receive true insights, but uses the play as a coping mechanism to shield himself from finding insights and himself from others or connecting with others, which he also purports as the purpose of his art, because he fears no one will love the real him because he's self-loathing. He's always done this and yet is not aware of it. His delusion is that he thinks he's tunneling toward the truth, but is actually tunneling away from it. The happy ending, in my opinion, is that death, which he feared his whole life, finally comes and turns out to be a friend because it serves truth on a platter. Death makes structure and sense of life, which is what he was seeking the whole time. The thing that he feared is the only way he would ever achieve his final goal. Without life, death would be a meaningless, infinite cavalcade of nonsense like this movie. Every attempt to reduce the complexity of the universe into a structured narrative is laughable and will degrade into an infinite regression of absurdity, which is storytelling and memory. And it is only in the smaller, more intimate empathies we have in private moments with the people that matter to us, that any semblance of true meaning or insight is found.
I wish you
I
wrote,
like that.
I wish you wrote the film.
No, because I would just have a guy come out and say that.
No.
It'd be like,
Yeah.
but it would be Robert McKee.
There you
So
go.
everyone would buy it. That's another thing about him is I love, in every Kaufman movie I've seen, so omitting Anomalisa, he has at least one character say, sweaty exposition's so fucking stupid. Like, it's such a sellout move, more or less. And then it'll cut to
Anomalisa
Phillip
has
Seymour
that.
Hoffman going, you're going to die, you're going to die. That's what the movie's about. And you're like, so he hates himself for selling out and constantly also does it if he needs to.
You need to see Anomalisa. I mean, really, it's.
Yeah.
I think it's one of his most solid non-choose-your-own-adventure. Because to Abe's point,
It's a
you're
lot.
right in the sense that I could watch this with a dozen people and there'd be a dozen interpretations.
Exactly.
And that's totally fair. I think it's when you're dealing with something so profound. The Roger Ebert quote I love is his review of it. He doesn't say this movie's good or bad. It's a really weird Roger Ebert review. It's his quote, here is how it happens. We find something we want to do. If we are lucky, or something we need to do, if we are like most people, we use it as a way to obtain food, shelter, clothing, mates, comfort, a first folio of Shakespeare, model airplanes, American Girl dolls, a handful of rice, sex, solitude, a trip to Venice, Nikes, drinking water, plastic surgery, childcare, dogs, medicine, education, cars, spiritual solace, whatever we think we need. To do this, we enact the role we call me, trying to brand ourselves as a person who can and should obtain these things. In the process, we place the people in our lives into compartments and define how they should behave to our advantage. Because we cannot force them to follow our desires, we deal with projections of them created inside of our minds. But they will be contrary and have wills of their own. Eventually, new projections of us are dealing with new projections of them. Sometimes versions of ourselves disagree. We succumb to temptation, but oh, Father, what else was I going to do? I feel like hell, I repent, and I'm going to do it again.
Simulacrum is the best title for the play.
I
He
love it.
starts with the best title and gets worse and worse.
I just adore this movie, and I love the puzzle morality of it.
Yeah.
It's the complexity, I think, is the thing I enjoy.
Isn't it when he says, I finally got the title, it's Infectious Diseases of Cattle, and the guy looks at him, he goes, no, trust me, you'll get it. There's layers. It works.
It works in a lot of ways.
It works.
Abe, any final thoughts?
No, you guys, I like.
You don't want to yawn or yell nerd?
No, I don't. Yeah, real snooze alert from over here in Abesville. No. It's a
All right.
Solid movie. I like your guys' interpretation a lot. I like mine less, having heard your
They're
interpretation.
quite different.
Mm-hmm.
Because also, as I resonate deeply with Charlie Kaufman because he seems so sad. And it's in my vested interest, speaking of simulacra and trying to reshape yourself consciously, to find a happy interpretation because I trust his judgment and I want him to tell me that you can find peace.
It's
which
the
he's
one
probably not trying to
This
say.
is the one movie where I do find, I think, what I consider to be, I don't want to say a happy interpretation, but I'm not on the sad side of things. Anomalisa, I found to be heartbreaking.
Okay. But I just don't...
But I talked to someone else and they're like, no. And I'm like, okay,
Interesting.
I don't.
Well, we'll cover that next time on Frame Rate.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.